Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and for what was supposed to be Monday's video, I'm still way behind, even though this is only Monday. Anyway, we're starting this series on monopolies and trust, like I said we would. And we start out with talking about what they actually are. Via Wikipedia, monopoly, from Greek monos, or single, alone, and polin, to sell, as described by Irving Fisher, is a market with the absence of competition, creating a situation where a specific person or enterprise is the only supplier of a particular thing, or is often the primary supplier, not the only. But yeah, they're the dominant force in the industry. This contrasts with a monopsony, which relates to a single entity's control of a market to purchase a good or service, and with oligopoly and duopoly, which consist of a few sellers dominating a market. So yeah. Perhaps monopsony is often confused with monopoly, but yeah. The monopolies are thus characterized by a lack of economic competition to produce a good or service, a lack of viable substitute goods, and the possibility of a high monopoly price well above the seller's marginal cost that leads to a high monopoly price well above the seller's original cost that leads to high monopoly profit. This is why competition is needed in a capitalist market, even though for companies their driving goal is economic power and control. It makes for a bad market for purchasers if there's only one who controls that market, because they have no real competition. And if they have no real competition, they can start really doing whatever they want, charging whatever they want. So yeah. Let's see. Monopolies are thus characterized by a lack of economic competition to produce the good or service, a lack of viable substitute goods, and the possibility of a high monopoly price well above the seller's marginal cost that leads to high monopoly profit. The verb monopolize or monopolize, depending on how you prefer to spell it with an S or a Z, refers to the process by which a company gains the ability to raise prices or exclude competitors. With economics, a monopoly is a single seller. In law, a monopoly is a business entity that has a significant market power, that is, the power to charge overly high prices, which is associated with the decrease in social surplus. Okay, so yeah, in economics, it refers to the sole individual, while in uh, the sense of business law, it's a single entity that has significant market power. It has the most power, even though it's not alone. It still dominates a market, having well over half of the income of a market. Over half the products. You start looking around at industries and you see that they're under parent companies. And we'll see this a lot with what we talk about when we get into listing these companies and their parent companies and everything else. There's a lot of monopolies. But yeah. And it's a huge part of what's wrong with America right now. Although monopolies may be big businesses, size is not a characteristic of a monopoly. A small business may still have power to raise prices in a small industry or market. So, we're not necessarily talking about, if you're not necessarily talking about on the national face or the world face, if you talk about on a regional area, you may have a brand that's pretty dominant. Like, there are certain gas chains or supermarkets or restaurants, fast food, whatever, that may dominate a region. Say the Southwest, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, in that area, Utah, they're all dominated by whatever particular this or that. You'll often hear about talk, oh, this on the West Coast, oh, this in the Northeast is a dominant one, and oh, this is a dominant one. So they may be highly dominant, but are only regional. So yeah. So they may monopolize power in that particular region. Anyway. Monopoly may also have monopsony control of a sector of a market. Likewise, a monopoly should be distinguished from a cartel, the form of an oligopoly, in which several providers act together to coordinate services, prices, or sales of goods. Now, this is also sometimes identified as a trust when it comes to big business. A trust or corporate trust is a large grouping of businesses, of business interest with significant market power, which may be embodied as a corporation or as a group of corporations that cooperate with one another in various ways, and essentially saying, we shall not step on each other's toes, but we want it so that everybody can make a big chunk of money, and we'll push against any smaller competitors. So yeah, they'll kind of combine forces, or it's more of a let's have a friendly handshake. You know, I'll not step on your territory toes. You don't step on my territory toes. We'll work together to crush other competition. So yeah, it's kind of similar when they say cartel. It's also kind of similar to this idea of corporate trusts, and this happened a lot in the Gilded Age. Your Rockefellers, your Carnegies. You would have the big oil trust, the big rail trust. Often just a handful of businesses that would dominate an industry and squeeze other competitors out so that they can set an agreed upon price, and so nobody steps on anybody else's toes, but they make the most money by and far. But yeah, um see, 1825, the business or corporate trust came into use in the 19th century, aka the 1800s, during the Gilded Age, as a legal device to consolidate industrial activity across state lines. In 1882, John D. Rockefeller and other owners of Standard Oil faced several obstacles to managing and profiting from their large oil refining business. The existing approach of owning or dealing with several companies in each state was unwieldy, often resulting in turf battles and non-uniform practices. Furthermore, the Pennsylvania legislature proposed to tax out-of-state corporations on their entire business activity. Concerned that other states could follow, Standard Oil had its attorney, Samuel C.T. Dodd, adapt the common law instrument of a trust to avoid cross-state taxation to impose a single management hierarchy. So yeah, even though they were a number of different companies, they banded together to almost work like one. The Standard Oil Trust formed pursuant to the trust agreement, in which the individual shareholders of many separate corporations agreed to convey their shares to the trust, and it ended up entirely owning 14 corporations and also exercised majority control over 26 others, essentially almost becoming like one giant corporation, even though there were multiple of them. 9 individuals held trust certificates and acted as the trust board of trustees. One of those trustees, Rockefeller himself, held 41% of the trust certificates. The next most powerful trustee held about 13%, and this trust became a model for other industries. So yeah, J.D. Rockefeller more or less becoming the head of Standard Oil, which, if you don't know who Standard Oil is, they're today known as Exxon. But at the time, they were the biggest oil organization. Now, if we look at directly from the Cambridge Dictionary, monopoly, an organization or group that has complete control of something, especially an area of business, so that others have no share. Now, there are supposed to be laws that help prevent or fight against trust and monopolies, but it's like they're almost never enacted anymore, and that's a problem. It really is. There's a lot of companies that should be crushed and broken up. And this is from... What are you from? Oh, just encyclopedia.com. By the late 19th century, big businesses and giant corporations had taken over the American economy. Late 19th centuries, the Gilded Age. Again, that's what we're talking about. Consumers were forced to pay high prices for things they needed on a regular basis. And it became clear that reform of regulations in industry was required. We're right back at that situation today. I try to point out that, companies, just because they can, are pushing prices up. That the growth of prices today is not solely just, oh, it's inflation. No, a huge portion of it is companies increasing prices. We know this. Research, papers, all of it shows, hey, yeah, this is because we have a huge monopolistic issue in this country where they are able to work together and raise prices. We're more or less back at the age of trusts. Because, that deregulation, that'll help us get the country become more profitable. It helps corporations become more profitable. It don't help the country. That's because we need to re-regulate. But you hear a lot of people cry, oh, we need to deregulate. That'll help raise profits. No! We're in this horrible situation in the first place because we deregulated. But yeah, I wanted to give you all a preview, a look at monopolies and trusts themselves. When we go into the next episode of this, we'll be looking at a monopoly or trust, and especially if they're a family of companies, because we've seen so many industries shrunk down to like 4 or 5 companies that control it, and yeah, that's not tenable. It's just not. We hit a situation where people can no longer afford to buy. Henry Ford, for all you can hate him for, at least he understood. Pay your workers well, because they are also customers. Of course, modern Ford Motor Company don't agree. But that's another thing when you talk about stocks, buybacks, and all that crap. Anyway, that'll be the end of this episode. As always, educate thyself. There we go. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.